Alright, so this is a suggestion via Discord. The name of the video is Egypt is building a huge new capital city. Here's why. This is coming from the channel Mega Projects, obviously one of Simon Whistler's many channels, guys. Let's go check it out. I expect to be absolutely educated today.
Egypt is a country with very grand history. The year of the founding of Egypt is seen as 3150 BC through the unification of the prehistoric kingdoms of Upper and Lower Egypt under Pharaoh Nahma. That means Egypt is a total of 5,174 years old. Now, granted, the profile of the state has changed quite a bit in that time, later becoming part of the Arab civilization and eventually an Arab republic, adopting Islam, being colonized several times, and gaining and losing various different parcels of territory.
And also one of my least favorite countries to visit. All right, I have two countries that I absolutely have utter disdain for, and it is basically Egypt and India. If you are a photographer, be very careful going to this country. They will take every single bit of your equipment and then tell you can have it back when you leave. Bro, I came here on an assignment. Either way.
Nevertheless, Egypt remains one of the oldest continuous civilizations in existence, something not lost in its great monuments, some of which rank among the oldest man-made structures, and understandably, some of the most visited sites in the world. Some of these sites lie directly next to the Egyptian capital city of Cairo, itself an ancient city with its own storied history and beauty. The city of Cairo is so old that when Alexander the Great visited Cairo's precursor Memphis, the city was already older to him than it is to us in 2024. Yet, while it will remain all of these things, as well as home to many of Egypt's jewels for many generations to come, it will, within the next decade, no longer be the capital of the modern state of Egypt. That title will soon pass to an as-yet unnamed city around 45 kilometers to Cairo's east, which will inherit its capital city status as well as around 6 million inhabitants. So today on Mega Projects, we thought we'd take a look
if you can afford it.
Extraordinary mega project and attempt to piece together why it is being constructed, what shall its features be, and why the decision has been made to move the capital of this storied country to it, rendering the city of Cairo to a sprawling but somewhat less significant city than it has been for millennia.
Before we continue, let me ask you something. You ever find yourself tangled in the web of, well, the web of web design? You're sitting there.
Okay, guys, really quickly, I want to go ahead and point out a couple of things, at least. If they are looking to build some type of mega city, they're obviously trying to copy Dubai. But if they do, they're going to, have it built by other people and not pay them. That sounds like the overall scheme that seems to be running out there, and that's specifically that region, at least, guys. I'm sure it'll be beautiful. Yeah, I'm sure it'll be beautiful. Absolutely. I'm not sure that I would go, right? Again, I just need, listen, my experience was so bad there, bro, that I tell people not to go all the time. I want to go see the pyramids, bro. There are pyramids to the south of Egypt completely, right? That are just as old, or if not older. I'll be honest.
Staring at a blank
They're smaller,
screen thinking,
it's a little bit more dangerous, but
how do I even start? Well, whether you're an artist, an entrepreneur, or just someone who wants a corner of the internet to call their own, building a website can feel like you're assembling a rocket ship. But don't worry, Squarespace has your back, and they are today's sponsors.
All right, really quickly, guys, this is his code if you guys want to use it. Right here. Promo code Mega Projects. They're doing 10% off. All right, let's go. Let's go and jump into the video, guys.
First, a little bit about the issues facing Egypt's current capital. Cairo is Egypt's largest city and one of the largest in the world. Brimming with history and culture, it's also brimming with about 23 million residents in its metropolitan area, up from 2.5 million in 1950. As a matter of fact, there are now more people living in Cairo than there were living in all of Egypt in 1950. In general,
rent is incredibly cheap. Also,
already at 105 million people,
incredibly
which makes
cheap.
it the 13th largest country in the world, it continues to grow at around a rate of 1.6% per year. Not only this, but the population of Egypt is densely concentrated along the Nile Delta and in its principal cities,
as it's always been.
Cairo. In fact, if the area of Egypt was counted only as the Nile Delta, coast, and the Nile Valley, it would be one of the most densely populated countries in the world, ranking only behind the city-states of Monaco and Singapore. And Cairo's neighborhoods are growing at an
Two places I would highly suggest you visit: Monaco and Singapore. Singapore.
Electrifying pace. According to the UN, the city's population grew by almost 500,000 people in the last year alone. This makes it one of the fastest growing cities in the world, and at 50,000 people per square mile, one of its most concentrated. With such a vast population, the city is struggling to cope with a range of problems. It's highly polluted, suffers from housing shortages,
A lot
and
of
severe
trash.
poverty, as well as circulation problems.
A
and
lot of
traffic
trash.
backups. All of this is hardly surprising for
The housing issues are mostly attributed to money. Because again, the amount of Americans that actually go over there and live over there, I'm sure you can find American living in Egypt. How much we pay for rent? It's money oriented. Trust me when I say this here, guys.
a city of its gargantuan size. Even
you
Egypt's
can
second
afford it.
city, Alexandria, is struggling to
Like if you could afford like $100.
contain overcrowding and circulation issues, despite being only 30% the size of Cairo. And Cairo's growth is not projected to slow down anytime soon. In fact, by 2050, it is expected to surpass 38 million inhabitants, more than the current biggest city in the world, Tokyo, and second only to Mumbai if its own population projections prove accurate.
Go to Tokyo if you have the choice.
Cairo's massive traffic jams are causing a huge problem with the state, with too many of the most important administrative buildings being located in Cairo's downtown. The city centre, as in every major city, is the most congested part of Cairo, where traffic brings the city to a complete standstill on a regular basis. And when security lockdowns are
Literally.
necessary for certain state visits and summits, added to this, it can lead to complete transit chaos in the middle of the city. Moreover, the massive use of cars and the resulting air pollution come at a cost to residents' health. According to the Clean Air Fund, air pollution is directly responsible for around 18,000 premature deaths per year, and around 2% of all deaths in Cairo are considered in some way attributable to its poor air quality. Cairo's population suffers from myriad health issues, including high rates of poverty-related malnutrition and microbiological diseases such as hepatitis and typhoid fever. The healthcare expenses resulting from the poor conditions also come at a major cost to the state, a problem Egypt shares with other countries of the MENA region, where, according to the World Bank, around 2% of its GDP is lost to the economic consequences of air pollution every year. The
Right.
problem pollution caused by vehicle use is also something that the government has limited means to curtail, since reducing fuel subsidies for cars would mean disadvantaging the low-income families dependent
Right.
on them, many
Absolutely.
of whom live in Cairo's
Absolutely.
poorer periphery and who are dependent on their vehicles for everyday mobility. So when the decision was announced by Egypt's housing minister in 2015 to build a high-tech new capital city, one with the capacity to hold more than 6 million residents, it was hoped that this would alleviate the significant burden of both Cairo's vast overpopulation and its administrative challenges, as well as offering a landmark new city.
They're not going to be able to afford it. Like, what's going to be the price? Because I'm telling you this right now, if they build some massive mega city in Egypt, right? The first thing that's going to happen is people from outside of Egypt are going to go and be like, "Wait, how much you selling that condo for? That apartment for? You're selling it for $3,000? Oh wow! I'm gonna go buy it. Let me go buy a quick 10 of them." That's what's going to happen, bro. I mean, it's good for the country, obviously, right? But it's not benefiting the actual people that are there, right? They do not actually make that much money per month, right? So how are they going to be able to afford all these brand new structures, bro? You're definitely trying to pull in foreigners.
Full of new and impressive
I'll pull up the
sites.
numbers.
However, the project has run into a series of potentially lethal problems, which threaten to torpedo Egypt's economy along with them. First, it should be noted that the decision to fashion a new city
Here goes. I got the numbers here for you guys. Okay, so the average monthly income in Egypt is $428. That's the average monthly income. Average yearly income is $5,000 US. They're not going to sell or rent these buildings or these apartments in this brand new capital city, okay, for anything that the average person there can afford. Again, look at Americans living in Egypt. Okay, you'll see a lot of these people talking about how cheap everything is because they're obviously, coming from a country that uses US dollar exclusively, right? Just understand, I'm not sure who they're building this capital city for, but it's not Egyptians.
city strictly for the purpose of functioning as the administrative capital of that country is not something without precedent. Brazil, for example, changed its capital city into the planned city of Brasilia, which
Right.
itself was built in the 1950s. This was done to offer a more central alternative to Brazil's erstwhile capital, the coastal city of Rio de Janeiro. Other countries like Australia and Canada have designed their capital cities as one significantly less populous than their most major major city, no doubt in order to enact a separation between the arms of the state and the problems coming with built-up urban areas.
Absolutely.
And these cities pale
That is
in
exactly what
to
it
the
is.
size and structural problems faced by the city of Cairo, accumulated throughout not only its vast history, but also through the rapid rise in the number of inhabitants. It should also be noted that fashioning new cities out of nowhere is something not unusual in the Middle East and the Arabian Gulf, with parts of Dubai and the King Abdullah Economic City in Saudi Arabia being some recent examples. As a matter of fact, the new capital is not even the first such planned city constructed in Egypt. Take the 6th of October city, a satellite city of some 400,000 residents 30 kilometers west of Cairo, which was founded in 1979 to alleviate some of the administrative and corporate burden from the capital. Or perhaps New Cairo City, located to Cairo's east and adjacent to the new administrative capital, similarly founded at the turn of the century to provide alternatives to the pent-up capital city.
Guys, really quickly, what's interesting is that this happens a lot, and it should definitely happen a lot, specifically with civilizations as old as Egypt. So, for example, guys, I live half the year in Spain. Now, the city where I'm in, basically, most of the time is called Malaga. Malaga is really, really, really old, okay? Not as old as Egypt, obviously, but really, really old. And when they built it, they obviously didn't plan for the sheer amount of people and tourists that come through the city on a regular basis, right? So what they had to do was start building other cities. They had to start moving people, moving all the cool stuff out of the city, because obviously the city itself was built 500-600 years ago and it wasn't planned correctly. I mean, education exists, right? And so, yeah, I would expect for a lot of countries to start replanning and dividing land, specifically for planned communities, guys.
In fact, all these projects
Makes
remain
sense.
concurrently under construction as Egypt's government races to find solutions to its expanding population and to provide housing and offices, helping to decentralize Egypt's various Cairo-based headquarters and institutions. Such projects are also taking shape in other parts of Egypt. In 2008, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi announced plans for the development of New Alamein City, a seaside resort located west of the second city of Alexandria on the Mediterranean coast. Construction of the Alamein Resort is primarily intended to draw tourism, but also to draw some of Alexandria's residents away from the city and to ease the congestion present there. Nevertheless, the new administrative capital ranks somewhat apart, both in its significance and in its scale. Plans for the new city were announced at the Egypt Economic Development Conference on the 13th of March 2015. The project, largely overseen by Egypt's Ministry of Defense, was intended to consolidate and move government buildings into a tightly controlled arena, extensively monitored by thousands of surveillance cameras. Per the announced plans, the new city was set to include a brand new government administrative district, a diplomatic quarter, a cultural district, 21 residential districts, a huge central park, a new airport, and a newly built monorail system linking it with Cairo. It would rehouse around 30 government ministries with a workforce of some 55,000 people, as well as foreign embassies, the country's parliament, the residence of the president, and of course the aforementioned 6.5 million residents. The new city is already home to the tallest building in Africa, the 77-floor tall iconic tower, as well as a huge presidential palace, multiple ministry buildings, schools, hospitals, and much more. The site is intended to be both modern and green, with the government having announced they will allocate 15 square meters of green space per inhabitant in the new development. The new capital.
I want to get some prices, guys. That'll explain.
Of open water and planted greenery twice the size of New York Central Park. All this in order to curb Egypt's massive problem with pollution and make the country generally greener. And so, like a great pharaonic project,
Africa's tallest building. Monthly rent $259. A 3-bedroom apartment, iconic at the iconic tower with sea views. $259. Okay, let's get it.
Of the 21st century, the city is growing out of the desert, complete with gigantic governmental buildings and all the other trappings. And it's easy to imagine that the new administrative capital, when complete, would not only be a necessity in order to reduce the overcrowding in Cairo, but also a sensible solution to the administrative problems faced by ministries in the capital. But with final completion not yet
at least you're keeping it cheap,
the Egyptian
guys.
government has gone deeply into debt, and some Cairo residents have declared that they cannot afford to live in the new city. For now, the city remains mostly bereft of human habitation, with an estimate of...
And China does this often also. They build all these mega cities out of nowhere, that no one can afford. Listen, understand the climate you are currently in, world leaders. Please do that immediately. You're building something that the people in your country cannot afford. And if you don't actually bring enough amenities there, the foreigners are not going to come. Right? Like if you don't like first worldize, let's say, that entire place, no one is going to come and buy up your buildings, bro. They're not. I mean, I get it. You want people to move there, but how could they? Right? If the average person makes $458 a month, okay, and an apartment for rent in Africa's tallest building here is $259. That's more than half of their income. How are they able to actually maintain that while still eating, while still paying electricity and internet, et cetera, et cetera? And how can they do that? Right? They can't. They can't.
Of only around
they can't afford
1,000
it.
families living in the city at the time of writing. The new city does not yet have a name and continues to be referred to simply as the New Administrative Capital, or NAC, with debate continuing on what to actually call it. And while construction of the new site has continued with aplomb since the project's inception, the project has faced mounting criticism due to its various backlogs, having by now bypassed both its intended completion date of 2022 and its original budget of $45 billion by quite a margin. As of 2024, the money piled into the project is estimated to be close to $60 billion, with construction expected to be complete later this year. And with all this accumulated cost and delay, the new administrative capital has resulted in a wide-ranging series of problems which have tarnished the project's fanfare and which are seen as potentially lethal to Egypt's relatively fragile economy.
To US dollar.
Among the many areas of mounting criticism faced by the project are its massive cost, its relative impracticality for lower-income families, as well as the various over-the-top elements that have been added to it. You see, unlike Saudi Arabia and Dubai, wherein such projects are financed by way of both countries' accrued oil wealth, Egypt is not a mega-rich state, and the vast cost of the project has raised major concern. In the time since President El-Sisi came to power, Egypt has been struck by low economic growth, rising inflation, and a severe currency devaluation, with the Egyptian pound having devalued by a startling 90% since 2014. The economy has especially floundered in the most recent few years, being hampered by world events such as the war in Ukraine, which greatly impacted Egypt's trading arrangements with both Russia and Ukraine, as well as both the COVID pandemic and the war in Gaza, both of which curtailed Egypt's vital tourism industry. In light of this, some of the plush aspects of the city...
Bro, of course it did. All right, so basically what Egypt did was they basically attached themselves. So basically they're using the US dollar to back their Egyptian pound. All right, and the reason why it's plummeting is because the dollar is plummeting. Right? At one time, it used to be worth something. Now it's not. It's just not. I mean, we printed multiple trillions or billions of dollars, guys, out of nowhere. We printed way too much money out of nowhere. That in return devalued our currency, and then that in return also devalued the world's currencies that utilize the US dollar in some meaningful way. Right? So that explains that. So yeah, they're suffering out there, bro. Oh yeah. I also see right here that apartments actually have shot up to roughly a little over $570 US currently. Right? So if you're trying to go right now to get an apartment in Egypt, it costs more than you make in a month. The average apartment costs more than you make in 1 month. And this is not normally like 2-person households here, guys. That's not a thing like that. That's more of a Western phenomenon, guys. Right? So yeah, they can't afford it. They can't afford to live in their country. So I can imagine if the president decides that it's going to be a great idea to go ahead and build a capital city while your citizens are absolutely suffering, how does that make sense? How does that make sense? The average rent is higher than the average take-home salary.
Have come in for especially acute criticism. Take, for example, its Grand Mosque, the Masjid Misa al-Kabir, which has come in for some particularly scathing commentary on social media. The mosque and accompanying community centre cover more than 19,000 square metres and cost 800 million Egyptian pounds, or around 20.7 million British pounds. It is the biggest mosque in Africa and one of the largest Islamic centres in the world, and the inside is no less grandiose than its vast exterior. Among its features, the mosque includes the highest pulpit in the world, standing at almost 17 metres tall, as well as a colossal chandelier in its main hall, the heaviest in the world at over 24,000 kilograms. When the details of the mosque's lavish interior were revealed, it led to heated discussions in Egypt. It didn't help that at the time the project was unveiled in March 2023, Egypt was suffering from its highest level of inflation in 30 years, at around 30% in that month alone. Another source of great outrage lies in the
30%?
rather lavish spending on the relocated ministries to the city. And no ministry stands to gain as much from the relocation as the Ministry of Defense, whose involvement in the whole project is in itself a source of great further controversy. The MOD's
Imagine.
new headquarters, known as the Octagon, will be a simply monumental structure of over 22,000 acres, becoming at once the biggest military headquarters in the world and also the biggest administrative building of any kind in the world. Its cost has been closely guarded by the government, but it's estimated to be in the region of around $400 million US. Now, building a defense military headquarters of this scale would be perhaps understandable for a military megapower, one with an overwhelmingly vast military or a boundless military budget. But Egypt is neither of those things.
Right.
With 440,000 active personnel, Egypt's military is large, but it's still smaller than both Vietnam's and South Korea's.
And that's
Both
not very
of them are
large.
significantly smaller than Egypt in population size. But it is in Egypt's defense budget where the lopsided cost and the scale of the new ministry is more keenly felt.
But I will say, though, they definitely need a solid military, like specifically where they are. Okay, they have to take on a lot of nonsense in the region, like a lot of nonsense specifically to the east of them. Okay, northeast of them, even a lot of nonsense. So I think I would do the same thing. How about this here? I would not create that building in that country based off of how, again, it's not a wealthy country, bro. So why are you building the world's biggest anything, right? But all right.
At around $9.4 billion, Egypt's defense budget is the 35th biggest in the world, smaller than that of Qatar, Kuwait, and the UAE, and roughly similar in size to Switzerland and Norway, neither one of which has an active personnel of more than 30,000 soldiers.
No,
But
bro,
for many,
they're not doing
besides
nothing.
the massive economic cost, it is some of the other suspected reasons underpinning the defense ministry's involvement which are causing lingering cynicism. You see,
It's a beautiful
in the 2010s,
structure.
Egypt went through two successful popular revolutions, one of which brought down the country's longtime dictator, Hosni Mubarak, and culminated with the democratic election of Islamist candidate Mohamed Morsi, and another which brought down Mohamed Morsi and undemocratically brought in El-Sisi.
And a lot of the people, a lot of the people that are going to come at me in the comments when I point out I'm not really a gigantic fan, specifically of going to Egypt under any circumstance. You're going to mention the Arab Spring. Okay, I know it. I smell it in the comments already. I get it. A lot of things are going on, so you need to be very cautious with what comes in the country. But there needs to be some understanding, at least. Okay, maybe you should say before people book tickets that you don't want drones, that you don't want any professional photography equipment that has a longer lens, right? Say all of these things, all right, and then I wouldn't have come, right? I sat in a hotel for a week, bro. Okay, so I wasn't happy at all.
The latter event resulted in a bloody and economically costly Islamist uprising in the Sinai region, and also an outsized role in government for the country's military, where El-Sisi had served as chief of staff before assuming the presidency. On both occasions, the congested nature of Cairo's city centre played a key role in the upheaval, as crowds of people were able to effectively block routes around the central square of Tahrir, bringing the city to a standstill and contributing to the success of both coups. But with the relocation of the capital and the rings of the state to the new administrative capital, this will no longer be very easy to accomplish. Unlike Cairo, the new city features open-wide boulevards difficult to submerge with protests and are relatively easy to navigate by military forces and the police. Keep in mind also, the sprawling Octagon will also house the headquarters of the Egyptian air and ground forces, as well as an unknown but probably significant number of troops. This will make it easy to mobilize and deploy troops to suppress any potential uprising. In addition, as we mentioned before, this new city has been built with strict surveillance in mind, with around 6,000 mounted security cameras and a high-tech live feed surveillance system in place. And if the use of the new capital by the military as a bulwark against their overthrow wasn't enough, there is a further suspicion about the nature of the financial arrangements behind the construction of the city. Initially, the project was intended to be
Corruption.
financed by UAE and Chinese investments. However, as these deals details began to fall through, responsibility for the construction fell into the hands of a new company, the Administrative Capital Urban Development Company, established in 2016. That
Okay.
company is owned in part by the Egyptian Ministry of Housing, but suspiciously, its
Oh,
controlling
really?
stake of 51%
So he can basically set the prices for anything because he knows that they, for the most part, have a not unlimited fund of money, but he can charge whatever he wants for a screw.
is held by the military. In essence, much of the construction on the new city has been carried out by a company whose profits are directly tied to the upper echelons of Egypt's armed forces. The company, whose chairman is the former deputy minister for housing in Egypt, recorded revenues of around $800 million in 2022, according to Forbes. So,
Right.
it seems that, in addition to being a sort of opulent fortress, the new administrative capital might also be a kind of get-rich-quick scheme for highly ranked military members, allegedly. Don't forget, close
Allegedly.
ties to the government through President El-Sisi, who served in the armed forces for 37 years before retiring the year he became president in 2014. Even the location of the new city has come in for criticism, with some analysts pointing out that the location actually works against its intended aim. Given Cairo's extensive urban sprawl, it is likely that it will continue to engulf surrounding settlements, and with the new capital situated already within touching distance of New Cairo, which itself is an outlying settlement attached to Cairo proper, there is a risk that all three cities may eventually simply merge, resulting in a sort of mega city.
Mega city,
This
right.
would work against the intention of rebalancing the built-up population of Cairo and would only spread out the vast population to include more of the precious little inhabitable land available in Upper Egypt without actually reducing the existing urban sprawl.
Guys, I would really like to know their like water layout. Like, how are they getting water?
Moreover, as has already occurred in other planned cities in Cairo's environs, the city is likely to attract the relatively affluent in Egyptian society, those either in a position to buy units in the modern new housing complexes, or those with comfortable state jobs that could bring them there. In short, an oasis for the wealthy,
Yes.
and not one which would
Yes.
affect many in the poorer classes in Egyptian
No.
society, therefore failing to resolve the massive growth of Cairo's poorer districts.
I think we guys, hold on.
Criticism are reaching
Hold on.
deafening pitch.
Wait.
With Egypt's economy continuing to falter and with only a thin trickle of residents moving into the new city, only time will tell if the project will stand in good stead, or if, as some have predicted, it will become a white elephant serving only the interests of Egypt's most privileged, and at the massive expense of its most deprived.
Right, bro. Okay, hold on. Simon Whistler, I love your content. Okay, I love how you deliver things. I love how you educate people. Right, but here's the thing. Okay, I think we solved this issue easily within the first 2 minutes of even hearing about it, bro. Because yeah, they can't afford this. Okay, so it's like, who are you trying to attract? It was like the people in like the UAE and Dubai specifically. Like when you built Dubai, who were you actually building it for? Were you just trying to like bring foreigners there, copious amounts of rich foreigners? Because that's all it is. All right. The people, the average person in Dubai or in the area, the region specifically, cannot afford to live there, and that's exactly what they're going to do here. Right? Remember when I stated this will be really good for the country's economy, sure, right? But this is not going to benefit the overwhelming majority of people. If the average apartment in the country right now is $570, right? Equivalent. Then, and the average person is making less than $500 a month. They can't afford this, bro. You wasted, you could have put your money, the money, into something that actually benefited the people. But instead, what did you do? Benefited yourself. And this honestly is indicative of like almost not every single country on the continent, but like a lot of them. Okay, it's a money grab. I want to see where that president is in 5 years. I'm gonna go ahead and guess somewhere hiding out somewhere, bro. Let me guess. Swiss bank accounts, Grand Cayman. But either way, listen, you guys all have an absolutely amazing day. Enjoy your day thoroughly. Guys, before we go, are you guys subscribed to the other channels? Logical Movie Reviews with Mr. L. Boyd along with Mr. L. Boyd Music. Both are found in the description. Check it out.